Think about this for a second. One day, every single star will burn out. Every galaxy will literally dissolve into nothing. And the universe, well, it's just going to become a cold, dark, empty void. Forever. It sounds absolutely final, right? Inescapable. But what if it isn't? Okay, let's dive into this, because the laws of physics might just have a secret loophole to survive the end of everything. Yeah, and let's be real, the source material just nails it here. An eternity of absolutely nothing is, well, it's lame and depressing. It really feels like a definitive final end to the entire story of life and consciousness. But you know what? That's not where this story ends today. So that's the big question, isn't it? Can you actually hack reality itself? Is there some clever, ingenious way for a civilization that's advanced enough to outlast all the stars and see a future so distant it's basically impossible for us to even imagine? The answer, unbelievably, might just be yes. All right, first things first, we have to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the problem we're talking about. This isn't about the end of the Earth or our solar system. No. This is the end of everything. This is the universe's ultimate final deadline, what we call the heat death. Now, what's really wild is when you look at the timescale here. I mean, just get this. In about 100 trillion years, the very last star finally flickers and dies. But we're just getting started. Quadrillions of years after that, even the corpses of stars, these white dwarfs, go completely black. And it keeps going. Over trillions upon trillions of years, entire galaxies just dissolve. And finally, after a number so big we call it decillions of years, even the first black holes evaporate away. The universe just becomes this silent, dark, empty state. So, who could possibly survive something like that? Let's imagine a civilization way, way out there in the distant future. We're going to call them the Noxans. And they, my friends, are the heroes of our cosmic survival story. Just try to picture it. It's 100 trillion years from now. The last stars are sputtering out like dying embers. And the Noxans? They're the only ones left. They've figured out physics we can only dream of. I mean, to them, our technology probably looks like cave dwellers playing with fire. But here's the thing. Even they are stuck playing by the same fundamental rules of reality. And they have a huge problem. Their ultimate goal, their whole reason for being, is to keep consciousness alive forever. The snag? They have a finite amount of energy. See, everything, especially the act of thinking, costs energy. And in a dying universe, energy is the most precious, scarcest resource there is. So their first move is pretty logical. They harvest all the last stars and build this absolutely colossal battery complex. But here's the catch. Even that unimaginable amount of power only lasts them a few 100 trillion years. That's a long time, sure, but it is not forever. Not even close. But this is where things get really clever. The Noxians realize they can't just brute force their way through a dying universe. They have to outthink it. They need a loophole, a hack in the system. And they find one in this fascinating concept that totally rewrites the rules on the cost of thinking. So, the whole thing hinges on this idea we're going to call Dyson's cold thoughts. The physics behind it gets pretty complicated, but the basic principle is surprisingly simple. Heat, at its core, is just wasted energy from particles jiggling around randomly. So if you can lower the temperature, you reduce all that waste, and that makes any process, including thinking, way more energy efficient. And this right here shows you the trade-off perfectly. Okay, so a hot, biological brain like ours, running at about 310 Kelvin, that's roughly 98 degrees Fahrenheit, might use, say, 20 joules of energy for one thought. But what if you could cool that brain down by half? Well, that same thought would take twice as long, but it would only cost half the energy, just 10 joules. You're trading speed for insane efficiency. Of course, there's a problem. You can't just stick a human brain in a cosmic refrigerator. Our squishy, fragile biology would just break. The only way this plan actually works is if the Noxans ditch their flesh and blood bodies entirely. They have to upload their minds, transfer their consciousness into artificial digital brains that can be cooled down to nearly absolute zero. Okay, so they've got their giant battery and their new digital minds. How do they actually use this cold thoughts principle to stretch that finite energy basically toward infinity? Well, it all comes down to their grand plan, a brilliant cycle of living and hibernating. This strategy is actually pretty elegant. Step 1, they live. They spend their energy during what they call cosmic days, existing in this vibrant, complex digital world. Step 2, they hibernate. They switch everything off during cosmic nights to radiate away all their waste heat and cool down. You can think of it like unplugging a really hot light bulb to let it cool off. So when they wake up, they're colder, which means they think slower, but they use far, far less energy. And then they just repeat the cycle, over and over, with the hibernation periods getting longer and longer each time. Now, this is the part that will absolutely bend your mind. For the Noxons inside this system, nothing feels different. Their experience is completely normal, totally continuous. Why? Because their perception of time slows down right along with their thought processes. A cosmic night that might last a million years in the outside universe passes in an instant for them because, well, they're not conscious to experience it. It's like a perfect sleep. So, the big question is, how long could they actually keep this up? The results of this strategy are, well, they're staggering. It pushes the very boundaries of what the phrase "a long time" can even mean. So while the universe outside is dissolving into that empty void we talked about, the Noxans are still around. They've cooled themselves to just fractions of a single degree above absolute zero. At this point, they are so unbelievably slow that one single, simple thought takes 1 trillion years to complete. But to them, it feels like 1 second. So what does all this add up to? If their plan works, their consciousness could experience the subjective equivalent of, well, that number. That's 2 trillion years. It's a number so huge it's practically meaningless to us. But for them, it represents a near eternity of thought and experience and existence. But can it really be forever? Probably not. Turns out, the universe throws up a few final roadblocks. First, you've got dark energy, this mysterious force pushing the universe apart, which might create a minimum temperature, a floor they can't cool past. Second, quantum noise. Tiny, random fluctuations at the smallest scales could, over eons, eventually scramble their digital brains. And finally, there's a chance the very matter their hardware is made of might not be stable forever, a concept called proton decay. So a true, literal forever, it might be impossible. But you know what? Even if it isn't a true forever, the takeaway here is just profound. What this concept suggests is that the laws of physics might not forbid life from adapting to even a completely dead and empty universe. Maybe consciousness isn't just some fleeting spark that exists for a cosmic second and then vanishes. And that leaves us with one final, incredible thought to chew on. What if life isn't just a brief accident,